Welcome back to the deep dive. You sent us the blueprints, the contract appendices, and, well, some pretty high-stakes financial models for these massive industrial projects.
We're talking oil refineries, huge solar farms, chemical plants, things on a massive scale.
Exactly. And today, we're taking the intellectual shortcut through all that material to focus on the legal roadmap for them.
Yeah.
EPCM contracts.
Right. EPCM Engineering, Procurement, and Construction Management.
So what's our mission with this deep dive?
Our mission is to really get past the acronym. It's not just about defining a term. It's about understanding the core architecture of these agreements.
How the risk is split up, where the money really is.
Exactly. We need to unpack its specific legal structure, the financial security measures, and get a feel for the incredible, sometimes tedious administration this kind of services contract demands.
Okay, let's jump right in then. Let's start with the most critical difference. Most people, I think, have heard of EPC.
Engineering, procurement, and construction.
Right, where one contractor just delivers a finished project for a fixed price. But EPCM, it covers the same scope of work engineering, procurement, construction management, but the structure is just fundamentally different.
It is.
So what is that single biggest shift when you go from EPC to EPCM?
The shift is entirely about control and who owns the risk. An EPCM contract is, at its heart, a pure services contract.
Just service.
Just services. And it's priced primarily on a cost reimbursable basis. So the client pays for time and the actual costs incurred. But here's the absolute key distinction.
Okay.
Under EPCM, the client, the project owner, holds the direct contracts. They are the ones signing the erection contracts with the construction companies and the purchase orders with the suppliers.
Wow. So the EPCM contractor isn't on the hook for a late delivery on a, $100 million turbine.
Not directly, no.
Yeah.
And they aren't managing the construction crew as their own employees.
They're more like an intellectual management layer over the whole process.
That's the perfect way to put it. The EPCM contractor does the engineering. They handle the whole procurement process, tendering, awarding contracts. But they manage the execution for and on behalf of the client.
So the client is the one carrying most of the schedule and cost risk for the actual build.
Precisely. And that's exactly why EPCM requires such a meticulous, such an auditable administrative system.
Yeah, I can see the conflict there right away. If the EPCM contractor is basically just selling time and expertise, how do they actually secure their own profit, their fee?
Well, they do that through a couple of cost reimbursable models. The source material lays out two main options. First, you have the cost plus fixed fee, or CPIF.
Okay, which sounds like a recipe for disaster if you're the client, just pure reimbursement plus a guaranteed profit.
It can be. The guidelines we looked at explicitly say that CPIF is, I'm quoting, not to be the best choice.
Why is that?
Because it just massively increases the risk of cost growth for the client. I mean, if the contractor's profit is guaranteed no matter what, where's the incentive to be efficient?
There isn't one, which I guess pushes everyone toward the second option.
Correct. The preferred structure is the cost plus incentive fee, or CPIF.
Okay, so how does that work?
With CPIF, the contractor still gets their costs reimbursed, but a big chunk of their profit is put at risk. They only earn that full fee if they hit very specific performance targets.
Ah, so you're aligning their interests with yours.
Exactly. You're aligning interests around schedule, quality, safety, all of it.
That's a huge structural difference. So going back to that risk decision, the client holds the contracts for most of the capital spend. What kind of contract forms are they using for these massive erection and purchase contracts?
They've got a few options. They can use their own in-house forms. They could use standard third-party ones like FEDI or NEC, or they can use the EPCM contractor's own forms.
And which is best?
The consensus in the material seems to be that using the EPCM contractor's forms, but then customizing them with project-specific conditions, is usually the most efficient way to go.
Why is that?
Simply because the EPCM team is already completely fluent in their own paperwork and their own processes. It just cuts down on friction.
Efficiency is everything on a billion-dollar project.
Yeah.
Okay, what about insurance? That must be astronomical.
It is, and the liability is sliced very, very thinly. So the client typically arranges the main construction all risks, or CURE insurance policy,
Mm.
that covers the physical stuff during the build.
Right.
But the deductible, that first layer of loss, that risk gets segmented. The client bears the deductible risk for the main EPCM contract itself.
Okay.
But the erection contractors, they are required to bear the deductible risk for their own specific contracts. So every layer of responsibility has its own layer of financial consequence.
This still sounds incredibly risky for the clients, especially if they're using project finance. What do the lenders think of this?
That's a major friction point. From the perspective of, project finance advisors or lenders, EPCM is usually not the preferred strategy. Lenders want predictability. They overwhelmingly prefer a 100% fixed lump sum price from a single EPC contractor. They want one point of responsibility.
They want certainty, and EPCM sounds like a whole lot of managed uncertainty.
Exactly. But here's the nuance that makes it work. The ETCM contractor's actual fee and their expenses, that's typically only about 10 to 20% of the total project cost, the CapEx.
So it's a small piece of the pie.
A relatively small piece. The vast majority of the spend, the 80 or 90% for materials, equipment, construction, that can still be priced using fixed methods like lump sum and unit prices, even with the client holding the contracts.
So the risk is contained, even if the management cost itself is variable.
That's the idea.
Okay, so to protect the client against a management failure, what kind of financial security is the EPCM contractor putting up?
Two critical forms. First, Appendix F in the contract mandates a parent company guarantee.
A PCG.
Right. An irrevocable, unconditional guarantee from the EPCM contractor's ultimate parent company covering all of their obligations. It links the project team's performance to the global financial health of the whole corporation.
That is a serious commitment. What's the second layer of security?
Appendix G requires a bank guarantee. This is an irrevocable, unconditional promise from a bank.
Cold, hard cash.
Pretty much. It's equal to 10% of the contract price for the implementation phase, and it has to stay valid until the very end of the guarantee period.
10% of their fees sitting in a bank at risk. So, with all that, what's the ultimate downside for them? If they make a catastrophic mistake, can they be sued into oblivion?
This is maybe the most shocking detail in the whole framework. Article 12 strictly limits the EPCM contractor's liability. For any breach, including faulty workmanship, their aggregate liability is capped at €5 million.
Wait. On a project that could cost billions, their total liability for a fundamental error is capped at €5 million.
€5 million.
That's a rounding error for the client if something really goes sideways.
It creates a massive risk-reward imbalance, for sure. The contractor is protected from an existential financial risk. And that cap also explicitly excludes indirect damages, loss of profits.
Which are often the biggest damages in a delay.
Always.
Unless, I'm guessing, there's gross negligence.
That's the carve-out, precisely. So the framework is really designed to limit their ultimate exposure, relying instead on the incentive fee and that heavy parent company guarantee to keep them focused.
It's basically saying, we trust your expertise, but we won't let a mistake here bankrupt your entire company.
It shifts that primary financial risk back to the client, who is, after all, holding the direct contracts.
Right, and since the client is paying for everything, and the contractor's liability is so low, success must hinge entirely on, well, intense administrative controls.
Absolutely. Let's pivot to that because the real key to success is often managing the people and the paperwork, not the construction itself.
And managing people who are billing by the hour is complicated. How do you make sure the hundreds of engineers writing time are all authorized and efficient?
Well, the material highlights a big operational risk here. EPCM contractors often hire 50% or more of their people through third-party agencies. Agency personnel.
And if those costs are just passed through, you could have massive overruns.
You could, and that requires forensic levels of control.
So what's the tool for that?
It's called the Personnel Authorization Form, or PAF. It's a mandatory form used by both the client and the contractor to monitor, check, and approve every single person who can bill time to the project.
It tracks their name, position, start and finish dates. All of it.
Meticulously. It prevents any unauthorized person from running up the bill.
Okay, that handles the individuals. But what about the big picture, the overall staffing plan?
For that, the contractor has to prepare and maintain detailed manpower plans. They're broken down by month, by job category, and by discipline. And critically, they have to include everyone, subcontractors, agency personnel, everyone.
So the client can see if the staffing actually matches the budget. Let's talk about changes. On a multi-year project, Scope changes are just guaranteed to happen. How do you stop a casual email from turning into a million-dollar cost overrun?
The change management procedures in Article 5 are extremely rigid. You have to use a specific form for any change in contractors' work. But there's one administrative rule that just really stands out.
What's that?
The guidelines impose a non-negotiable rule on communication.
Sure.
And it is. Nothing communicated via MS Outlook or other email programs shall be binding.
Nothing. Not one email. That seems totally contrary to how business gets done today.
I know, but it's not about being a Luddite. It's about control and having an audit trail. It forces every binding decision, every instruction that might have a dollar value into the formal contract management system or document management system.
It creates an immediate, unbreakable paper trail.
Right. It means no one can claim they approved a $10 million change in a 2-line email reply that got buried in some chain. It forces the administrative rigor to match the financial stakes.
That makes a lot of sense. So what about controlling the actual cash flowing out the door? What are the gatekeeper forms for the client's money?
There are two main ones. First is the authorization to expend form. This is used to track any cost that was not in the original target budget. No surprise, costs get paid without a formal sign-off.
And second?
The second is the progress payment certificate form. Since the client is paying the construction contractors directly, the EPCM contractor uses this certificate to verify and certify those invoices before the client releases a single dollar.
So they're the final checkpoint.
They're the final accountability check before the client's money is spent.
Okay, let's get to the heart of the motivation here. That incentive fee under the CPIF model. This is the EPCM contractor's actual profit, and it's all based on metrics.
4 major disciplines, all laid out in Part 2 of Appendix A.
So let's start with quality. How is that measured?
Quality gets a pretty big slice, 35% of the incentive. The whole principle is do it right the first time.
And the key metrics.
Adherence to quality procedures is one. Swiftly resolving any non-conformances, ideally within 2 weeks, is another. And then there's a really demanding one.
Which is?
Making sure that purchase order revisions caused by design errors are kept below 3% of the total value. In modern engineering, that is extremely difficult to achieve.
I'll bet. Okay. If quality is 35%, the biggest chunk has to be safety.
It is. Health, Safety, and Environment, HSE, gets the largest weighting at 50%. Half the fee.
Wow.
This reflects the client's philosophy that all accidents can be prevented. And performance is measured monthly with standard metrics, like lost time incidents and total recordable incidents per million hours worked.
So half of their potential profit depends directly on how safe that site is.
It puts real financial muscle behind the safety culture.
The rest is tied to time, measured by project milestones. And the source material has this fascinating structure: carryover, standard fall, and recovery or fall. How does that actually work?
It works like a really high-stakes grading system with some conditional forgiveness. The carryover milestones, the C milestones, are like small weekly assignments.
Okay.
If you miss one, the money isn't lost immediately. It just piles up and carries over to the next deadline. So no immediate penalty, just more and more pressure.
Right.
Then you hit a standard fall or SIS milestone. This is like the big midterm exam. If you miss that one, you immediately forfeit the money for that milestone and all the carryover money that's piled up behind it.
So the penalty is immediate and absolute. That is a massive push to hit those critical dates.
It is.
And what about that last one, recovery or fall?
That's the final milestone, MS11, which is ready for startup, or RFSU. If the EPCM contractor hits this final deadline on time, any previously missed milestone money that's still recoverable suddenly becomes payable again.
So it's a final chance to get it all back.
It is. It's a huge motivation for a strong finish.
And then, even after the plant is built, there's the availability criteria.
Correct. This uses a formula, the Plant Availability Performance Formula, PAP. The goal is 95% availability during the first year of operation. It ties their final paycheck to the client's long-term operational success.
We've seen that EPCM is so much more than a simple service agreement. It's really a complex, high-stakes system for managing risk and expertise, where the client keeps ultimate control and exposure.
And its success really depends entirely on that stringent administrative structure, the PAFs, the payment certificates, the change forms, because that's what provides the strict auditable control you need when the client is footing the bill.
Accountability isn't enforced by huge liability. It's enforced by transparency and incentives.
Exactly.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, here's a final thought for you to consider. Remember that even after the project is accepted, the The EPCM contractor provides a sweeping 24-month guarantee. It covers their own work, the manufacturer's work, and the erection contractor's work.
It's a very long tail of liability.
It is. And that raises a really important question for you. Knowing that you're on the hook for 2 full years after you leave the site, how does that fundamentally change the way you would approach managing project quality during that critical final construction and commissioning phase? What extra effort does that timeline demand?
That warranty period really does extend the definition of a successful delivery. We hope this deep dive gives you a strong foundation for managing complexity in your own ventures.
Until next time.